Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Javier Alvarez. Welcome to the European dilemma on switching to
Buenas
permanent
tardes, soy el
standard
doctor
time.
Javier Álvarez. We're here to talk about a matter that leads to a lot of conflict, but that could really improve our quality of life. As you know, twice a year, we change our clocks between summertime and winter time. We do it twice a year, and we do it all over the European Union, and it's been happening for many years, since the 1960s and 1970s. But that's not the way it's always been. In the 19th century, every city, in fact, had its own time. It was much more biologically oriented because the time was set to biological time. Of course, there were advantages, but and consequences to this. But by the mid-19th century, especially with the railways, it became necessary to unify time. When it was noon in Barcelona, it was at the time it was a little over 11:30 in Madrid, and it was the UK railways that were the first that pioneered this unification of schedules and of time in the 1840s, and then they were followed by, well, France and Germany and so forth. The idea was that there was a need to unify just to make sure there were fewer accidents and problems. The United States only unified time with 4 time zones in the late in the 1880s. Later, the European Union felt the need to unify its time within the European Union to facilitate the internal market. So 4 time zones were adopted. The first, what we call GMT plus 0 or GMT, and then GMT plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, and plus 4. GMT plus 1 and comprises countries such as Spain, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Germany, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Poland, Slovakia. Look at this. Spain and Poland, which are so far from one another, are on the same time zone. This has got to have an impact on people's lives. In 1981, the European Union adopted its first directive to regulate time changes, which take place twice a year. Different agreements were reached over the years, and it wasn't until 1994 that certain dates were agreed across the board. The last Sunday in October to switch from summertime to standard time or winter time, and and then March for the change to summertime. The current directive was adopted in 2001, and then in 2007 there was a report from the European Commission that highlighted the need to maintain harmonized time to ensure good functioning of the internal market. Now, in the midst of all this, as of March last year, we find ourselves at a crossroads because the Commission decided to ask the population how it felt about this time change twice a year. So there's a possibility that this might change. The original reason for time changes was energy savings. But in fact, a lot of studies have shown that the energy savings are minimal, and yet time changes have a significant impact on human health. And so there's plenty of room for controversy. I am a physician and a physiologist. I've been seeing patients with sleep disorders for many, many years, and I can assure you that, well, chronobiology and biological rhythms are one of our specialties. And of course, we follow biological rhythms. The importance of light for our life rhythms is crucial to our well-being and our health. Sunlight is a very precious resource. We can see it, we can get more of it in some countries than others. But even in countries with plenty of sunlight, the fact is that we're using natural lighting less and less. We spend more and more time in caves, indoors. The minimum amount of natural light that people should be receiving every day is 2 hours a day. And when I talk about natural lighting, I talk about being outdoors, not in a very, very bright apartment or house. We need it to regulate our immune system, our muscles, and all sorts of other things in our bodies. I mean, the fact is that we're spending more time in caves than ever before in history. So leaving aside the importance of natural lighting, we need to have the healthiest possible time use to ensure that the population can get as much natural lighting as possible. Without further ado, you will have precious information from all of our speakers today. So I'll go on to talk about them. We have great speakers. First, I'd like to introduce Izaskun Bilbao.
Shadow reporter of the proposal for the directive of the European Parliament and the Council discontinuation seasonal change of time. And she will give us an explanation of the European Union, like the process and key argument for the European Union decision to end the Izaskun is going to focus on what are the new steps, what do you think can be done to facilitate that all the member states and the decision before 2021. Thank you, Izaskun. Welcome. It's your turn.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Bueno, pues después de esta extensa y buena introducción, voy a deciros que en el año 2018 las instituciones europeas pusieron en marcha un debate sobre
European institutions posited a debate about changes to summertime and wintertime. And this was originally, these changes were based on energy savings, but there were a lot of scientific studies that showed that the energy savings didn't actually happen in many of the places where they took place because they depended on climate and individual habits. Other studies took place or were organized about about other impacts, including the impact on human metabolism, sleep patterns, and other biological parameters. So all of these studies showed that this moving of the hands of the clock that we have twice a year is far from harmless. It particularly has an impact on children and elderly people, and it also has an impact on agriculture, in particular on livestock. So all of this led to a reconsideration of this practice. This data, plus the fact that time changes are visible to all and have quite an impact to everybody, led the European Commission to consult the population. And this was a world-beating consultation. Over 4 million Europeans took part in it. Nearly 24% supported the abolishment of this practice. A practice regulated by an EU directive since 2001, but which had actually been in operation since the 1970s oil crisis. For you to understand just how reluctant people are to change this, once again, I'll mention the fact that until the 19th century, every town had its own time. In the conference held in Greenwich in 1884, there was an agreement to coordinate time zones, but a decision within a country may not really correspond to the time zone that it should have because of longitude. I mean, we've been on Central European time for many years, even though geographically we should be on Western European time. This was because of a decision by General Franco, who decided to be in sync with the Third Reich. And this kind of arbitrariness also has an impact in each country. Obviously, changing this sort of thing is not a trivial decision. Time is money, as we know, but time also reminds us of our mortal condition. So it also links up with our emotional and rational dimension. Time is about exact measurement of time. That's what clocks are about. And music is about sort of expressing emotion. And of course, there are many things in music that operate according to mathematical ratios. So time is actually perhaps what we perceive in the most relative of ways. Time flies, as we say, when we're having a good time, when we're in a hurry. However, when we're bored, it's as if time had stopped still. With the view to reaching an agreement on such a delicate matter, the European Parliament reached an agreement to put an end to these time changes, and it designed a procedure to do this on a consensus basis. We proposed launching of a 2-year deadline until March next year for the European Union member states to choose whether they would opt for their current standard time or summertime on a coordinated basis. We also designed a way to coordinate and exchange information to ensure that everybody could weigh the consequences of everybody else's decisions. In this way, we would prevent the new time zone maps having a serious impact on services and other matters. That is why an assessment committee for member states and authorities was going to be convened to analyze the proposals from each member state to try and prevent possible problems. After this prior assessment period, as of March of 2021, the idea was to start putting this procedure to an end in an orderly fashion. There was also the idea to have midterm evaluations to verify that this change in practice wouldn't cause more problems than it was meant to address. Disagreements among member states and between member states and the European Commission's proposal of 2018 have been paralyzing this decision. The European Council of Ministers does not seem to have this on its agenda or among its priorities. Neither does it seem to be a priority for the next few years. It's one thing to say we want to abolish the changes, but it's another thing to choose which time zone to place oneself in, because the reasons in favor or against clash with one another. The idea to make as much of sunlight and other factors also has to do with longitude, but also with latitude as well. In the positions proposed by some member states, latitude is as important and salient as longitude. This creates all sorts of other doubts. You also have to think of your position, your economic perspective, and the location of your main customers. So your decisions will also depend on what your neighbors decide. So if we make good use of the time available to reach this decision, we will have proven that time is money. Otherwise, we will we will have shown that not all that glitters is gold, and we will also have shown, in some cases, that time doesn't heal everything. In fact, we might continue to experience the determined impact of all these changes. That's the situation in European institutions. Thank you.
Nice explanation. We will have the answer after the meeting. I don't know if it may be, I don't know if you could, Izaskun, ¿podrás quedarte con nosotros toda la...? Creo que no, creo que Izaskun tiene que marchar. Bueno, ya nos dirá después. Okay, now we go with the next speaker, who is María Ángeles Roll de Lama. She's PhD on physiology and she's professor on Murcia University. She studied the impact of circadian rhythm on our health. And she's one of the most important person in our country, and I should say that in whole Europe about circadian rhythm is we have all the doctors that work with the sleep medicine for the last 10 years have learned so many things from them and from her team, and it's very, very important because it's so useful for our patient. And thank you to her, because we can help many patients thanks to her. Okay. María Ángeles, she's going to talk about the impact of the day saving time has in our circadian rhythm. Thank you, María Ángeles.
Oh, thank you very much for your nice presentation. I am not, you have put a level maybe too high. Let's see if I can reach the expectations. I'm trying to share my, presentation. I think you can see it. Okay, well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for the kind invitation to be here. My little talk is going to focus on the impact of DST on the circadian rhythms. But first, and as you will probably know, the circadian system is a network of elements composed by a master clock located in the suprachiasmatic. Just a minute. I'm going to use the, okay, perfect. By a master clock located in the suprachiasmatic nuclei or the hypothalamus that commands peripheral clocks in almost all tissues and organs. These clocks sends its temporal signal to the organism through humoral and nervous signals, including melatonin secretion, and as a consequence, practically all physiological variables show a 24-hour pattern, including the sleep-wake cycle, locomotor activity in animals, body temperature, arterial pressure, or hormonal secretions. But this clock is set every day by inputs. The most important one is the light-dark cycle that sets this clock to exactly 24 hours. But also are important signals, the exercise and feeding schedules, as well as social contacts. Also, some variables can feedback the clock. For example, our sleep pattern determines how we do exposure to light. But to be honest, our internal time is not exactly 24 hours, but we tend to live days a little bit longer. In fact, the mean is 24.2 hours. And although chronotypes exist with differences in this period of the rhythms, it is true that the natural tendency of our clock is to live to delay or to adjust more easily to delays. This is why we see here this movement of this displacement to the right in the sleep pattern. This is why we can adjust more easily to the fall change than to the spring change. It's quite easy to understand by the audience. If I ask you to go to bed tonight 1 hour later, you will probably have no problems to do that. But if I tell you to go to bed 1 hour earlier than usual and sleep, in fact, you will probably toss and turn in the bed for 1 hour. That's what occurs during the spring shifts. But it is also important the phase relationship among these physiological variables, like notes of a beautiful song driven by the master clock. But during the DST transition, we move our work time without the parallel change in the sun clock, in the light-dark cycle. This implies that these rhythms must adapt to this new point, and the velocity for resynchronization is different. And for example, for cortisol, takes longer. During this period, we experience internal temporal order impairment. And this is why we feel a little bit discomfort till a new unstable phase relationship is achieved. This is different from jet lag, because in the case of jet lag, we move not only our clock time, but also the sun clock. And since light can help to synchronization, it is easier to achieve the new, let's say, target hour. So it is important that our biological clock is in line with this external environmental timing determined by the light-dark cycle, but also we must live with a clock time that imposes our work and leisure duties. When transition with the DST, the relationship between sunrise and wake time is reset, as this was 3 or more weeks ago. We go back in time. And what are the acute effects of DST? Well, sleep is shortened. We experience worse performance, a slight moderate increase in heart attacks, and an increase in social jet lag. My position is quite simple to maintain, because if we see what the Society for Research on Biological Rhythms, the European Sleep Research Society, the Spanish Society for Sleep, or the Portuguese Sleep Society, they all claim for DST ends. In the meantime, and before knowing the final decision, if you want to score your chronodisruption degree, you can make this 3-time test that is located in our webpage to know exactly if your internal time matches or not your environmental and work schedules. Sorry, I haven't practiced for a long time and it's difficult sometimes. Yes, to end, some misunderstandings. We should avoid the term summertime to refer for DST, because it is associated with the positive attributes of summer, and the opposite occurs for winter. So standard time is better for preferring as, let's say, winter time. We do not change the time. We have a lot of times we have seen. We only move our clocks. And also, we do not, let's say, counterbalance the positive or negative effects of the DST. I mean, we cannot, if we assume that the sprinting implies negative effects, they are not compensated in autumn, at least not at the individual level. For example, if you have experienced a heart attack. So, nothing else. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Maria Ángeles, for your nice and amazing explanation. I'm sure that we will have questions for you after the next speaker. Okay, now is the time to go to the States. We have with us Jai P. He is an activist and founder of the Safe Standard Time in the United States of America. Nice to have you with us, Jay. Here is your turn. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much. And good morning. It's still morning here in San Francisco, so I'm hoping that the sun will come out as this progresses. My name is JP. I'm a software engineer in San Francisco. I'm originally from rural Iowa. I've been a humble advocate for standard time my whole life. It's an interest that stems from my appreciation of astronomy and from my interest in circadian health. I founded Safe Standard Time in 2019 as a response to the sudden push to retry permanent daylight saving time here on the West Coast. The goal of my nascent campaign is to preserve and extend the observation of standard time in North America. Standard time is the best clock for health and safety for children and workers and generally for everyone. And it's also the quickest way to end clock changes to and from daylight saving time twice every year here in the United States, as it's pre-approved by federal law. Any American state can opt out of DST immediately and without Congress simply by restoring its own permanent standard time, as Arizona and Hawaii have already done. A few months ago, I was introduced to Tisha, and she was already assembling what would soon become the International Alliance for Natural Time. Our alliance advocates for permanent observation of natural time across the world. In a practical sense, this simply means geographically appropriate sun-based time zones, which is essentially the same as what we in North America call our standard time. And though each nation in our alliance faces unique political and cultural and political circumstances, I feel confident in the fact that history and science really do support our mission. Natural time is essential for optimal health, safety, education, economy, and even the environment. It really is the simplest and fairest solution to the question of how to set clocks everywhere. And finally, I wanted to say it's been an honor for me personally over these last months to meet so many accomplished scientists and doctors in this field. And I really want to thank you for inviting me to this event.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you for your activism in this very important part of the health of our population. It's really nice to travel to San Francisco always, as in the media.
We're glad to have you. Thank you.
Okay, now we have the other part of the alliance in Europe. We have with us to Ticia Luengo Hendricks. She's Better Time advocate. She's co-founder of the International Alliance for Natural Time and the Dutch platform Better Children. She will give us the explanation how is the situation in Netherlands, in the Western Europe, and the key and social environmental argument for ending with the clock changes. Ticia, thank you so much. Welcome. It's your turn.
Sorry, there was noise here before, so I had it mute. Yes, thank you. I'm actually half Spanish, and I grew up near Altea in Alicante. So if you look at the map that we saw at the beginning of this piece, you see that the meridian of our natural time zone, of our Western European time, actually runs straight through Alicante. So we could call it, instead of Greenwich Mean Time or London time, we could also call it Alicante Mean Time. It's a very interesting thing to consider. I live in the Netherlands now, and I've been a better time use advocate for about 10 years now. Started when I discovered that it wasn't having twin babies that made us so tired. It was having to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning in order to get my eldest daughter to school by 8. That was really tiring us all so much, having to do that every day. And also my children were very difficult to wake up at 7. So I researched it, and I started advocating for later school times, later work times, for evening types, night owls. And later we changed, we broadened our scope, and we also, we basically advocate for optimal time use for all chronotypes. When the EU proposal was finally made in 2018, we joined other Dutch advocates, and we called ourselves the Health Time Initiative, as opposed to summertime or wintertime, health time. And we were invited to the expert sessions of the government. We wrote an extensive political position paper about this whole subject, about everything, the history, the science, all the aspects of circadian rhythms. And this paper is downloadable from our site in 4 languages, free for everyone. I also, at that time, I also contacted other European advocates, and in doing so, I came across the Catalan time reform Time Use Reform Initiative, which later became the Barcelona Time Use Initiative. And together, as Jay explained, we formed the International Alliance for Natural Time. In the Netherlands, the situation is pretty much the same as in other European countries, that they have not taken a formal position yet, and they are waiting to coordinate with neighbors, and they are waiting for more research. The only difference in the Netherlands is that the decision lies with the Ministry of the Interior, not the Ministry of Transport, as is in the rest of Europe. And this ministry commissioned a study from our Royal Institute for Public Health and Environment, and they concluded that the best thing for Holland would be to abolish daylight saving time and to go back to our permanently go back to our standard time, preferably our natural standard time, which is Western European time. This is also downloadable from our site, this report. And just a second. Pretty much all European countries are stating right now that they need more research, they need more impact analysis, they need more evidence. But we say in our International Alliance, we said there's enough scientific evidence, there's enough real life evidence as well. There have been a number of countries who've implemented permanent daylight saving time and recanted after a few years. And there's also a very simple solution for Europe. It's not complicated at all. We just all have to permanently go back to our natural time zones. And we saw them at the beginning. That's the nice map that you see there. It's very simple. If we all just abolish daylight saving time, go back to the standard times we have already, then you see that Eastern Europe goes back to Eastern European time, which is their standard time, which is their natural time. Central Europe goes back to Central European time, which is their natural time. And we in Western Europe, which is Spain and France and the Benelux, we go back to our standard time, which is Central European time, but we actually should be going back to Western European time. The Alicante mean time, that's what we should be on. And so that it is a very simple solution. If you look at the map, the lines are very clear. It would mean that we would be in our own natural time zone. And it would be much healthier for everyone, not just for, it's not just health. It doesn't just have impact on human health. It also has impact on the whole economy. As we heard before, it impacts everything, including performance and also schooling, the school. I lost my train of thought, sorry. I wanted to explain that we are currently in Western Europe, we're currently on Central European time. And what that in effect is we have been on permanent, since the Second World War, we've been on Central European time. So we've been on permanent daylight saving time since the Second World War. That's the last 70 years. Then in addition to that, since the 1970s, we've had daylight saving time 6 months of the year, now 7 months of the year. We have had what the French call double summertime. And it sounds really fun, but it is not, because it means we have to get up 2 hours before we should have to get up according to our solar time. And also we have to go to bed 2 hours earlier than we should. And our bodies know this, as we've just heard. And so that's why it's extra difficult for people in Western Europe to get up in time and to go to bed to time. That this leads to sleep deprivation because our bodies cannot really adapt. And all this sleep deprivation leads to a large, it's a huge list of all kinds of diseases and illnesses and problems, mental, physical. Children's development, that's another thing I wanted to mention, that it's very important for our children as well, because teenagers, especially teenagers, temporarily become later chronotypes. All of them, even people who are born as very early birds, become sort of day types. And so they should, now researchers have stated that they should start school at 10 o'clock in the morning. But for us in Western Europe, if you say 10 o'clock in the morning, our natural time, it would actually be 12 o'clock in the clock we use now. So our teenagers should not start school until 12 o'clock in our current, summertime. And we actually make them go to school like 4 hours sooner and have to get up even sooner in order to get to school. So we're doing them, we're doing them harm. It's not good for them. It's not good for their development. It's not good for their school results, but especially for their development and their mental and physical health. Also, a lot of mental illnesses develop during the teenage years, and this could be also an influencing factor. So there's a lot of arguments on why we should just do this. It would at least make a difference of an hour. And it would impact everything from our health to our economy. And I was also going to mention the environment. There's also an aspect, an environmental aspect. On the one hand, you have the shift in human activity. If we have rush hour later in the day when it's warmer, for example, especially here in Spain and in France, then you have more pollution because you have rush hour during hotter times of the day. Another aspect is, for example, the light pollution, which takes place, especially more here in the north, in the early mornings when before sunrise, people go to work and construction starts working and they all need these really big lights, which seriously disrupts the living environment. So those were my talking points.
Thank you so much, Ticia. I agree with you. It's a really nice explanation. And I don't know if you know that here in Spain we are the kings of sleep deprivation. We sleep 1 hour less than the rest of the rest of European citizens. Is 1 hour. If how you can imagine what it means.
Look at the map. It's very low because Spain is even to the west of the meridian, which is the worst part to be within a time zone. The more west you are, the more sleep deprived you are. There's also been studies done within time zones. So, it's especially.
I think that Maria Angeles is going to explain. Maybe I would like to ask her about this. Because I know that they have many studies that say it depends how people work depending of when the sun rise. And I agree with you. Another funny thing, I agree with Alicante Meridian because my medicine study was done there in Alicante, so it maybe should be a coincidence. And then we stop with Greenwich and put Alicante. It's just a joke. Okay, now we have time for discussion and for answer. And maybe Maria Angeles, if you want to talk, if it's possible that you give any explanation of this kind of.
I agree with her. That's true. I mean, differences in light exposure according to longitude occurs in Spain because our country is wider than just one clock hour. So you have the problem of choosing which one is best because what fits for Alicante is not so good for Santiago de Compostela. So it's difficult. Anyway, objectively, there is a simple way to try to make an approach. In our lab, for example, we have made several simulations considering possible scenarios. I mean, impermanent standard time, impermanent summer time, with the Central European time, and so on, for different Spanish locations. And you can see with the standard working time that, we can talk about that. But you can see how much light do you receive in the morning and how much in the afternoon. This is important because light in the morning has the capacity of advancing your clock, while light in the afternoon makes the opposite and delays your clock. So if you want to find a, let's say, ideal situation, you will try to find in which position you receive as much light in the morning than during the afternoon. And then your clock will be, let's say, stressed. Okay, and with these simulations, you can make a, let's say, more objective decision. Because anyway, if you make the decision, for example, in summer, she was talking about adolescence. If the natural tendency during this period of life of being a later chronotype is increased by exposing them during the summer to this long evening with a lot of light, then this tendency increases. You generate a positive feedback instead of a negative feedback that normally in physiology corrects the deviation.
Yes, this is. I read one news from one. I think it was 2029, and said that in Venezuela they closed. They changed their clock. They postponed 1 hour the school start time, and was wonderful for the adolescent that you are saying. But the bad news was that after that paragraph I read that they stopped with this change 5 years after. So it's something that is really is hard to know why, because we have experience in the States, in California, about what the time of when high school starts, and I know that you have very good experience that seeing that if you start later, the adolescents have better performance, better health, better mood disorders.
Yes. There's a group in the United States called Start School Later, and they've been at this for many years, and they've recently made great strides, passing a bill in California to start school later, literally, and then it's quickly spreading to other states, and it's a good sign. It's a good progression. There's a challenge though in that there are politicians that are supporting Start School Later and also supporting permanent daylight saving time. And if you are moving the clock forward an hour and moving schedules forward an hour, they just cancel each other out, and you gain nothing but an inaccurate clock. Really, we should be restoring permanent standard time and moving the start of school later, and hopefully certain workers as well. There are many industries that are starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, just like schools are starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we should look at it. Is this the best thing to do for our health and our safety? When Tisha was talking about the environment, I was thinking also of they found in the state of Indiana that they weren't always on daylight saving time. They were on standard time year round until the early 21st century, and I think it was in 2007 that they adopted the switching of clocks, the seasonal daylight saving time. So there was a study done by Cochin and Grant to look at the economy of this and the environmental impact, and they found that with daylight saving time, we are forcing people out of bed an hour early. And that causes them to get up in the dark and in the cold, and they turn their heat on. So when they would normally be, it's healthy to be sleeping when it's a bit chilly. It helps you sleep. So people are running their heat in the morning more, and then in the evening they're running their air conditioning more. And they have found that this increased residential and commercial and governmental electricity bills by several millions of dollars, and it was also increasing pollution. So there are, when I look at who's supporting permanent daylight saving time in North America, it's usually the local chamber of commerce. There's a theory that if people get off work and the sun is still out, they're going to drive their car and go to the shopping mall. And I would counter that and say, so much shopping now is being done online, not so much in retail, and that's a natural progression that has been expedited through the pandemic. But even if we were benefiting this niche of the economy, we are at what cost? It's found that it's harming our health, or harming our safety. And it's even harming our productivity across all sectors. When you're forcing people out of bed an hour early and then keeping them up an hour late in the evening, they are losing sleep. We're losing an average of 19 minutes of sleep every night that we maintain daylight saving time. And that hurts productivity. And it's even been found to lower wages by 3 to 5%. So in the end, it's not good for the economy. It's not good for the average worker. And all that aside, even if it were good for the energy policy, which it's not, even if it were good for the economy, which it's not, at the end of the day, the most important thing is public health and public safety. And it is hugely detrimental to be doing this to the public. And I think that should be our number one priority.
And if I could say one more thing about the later school times, there have also been studies done in the Netherlands and in Russia, and there's evidence that children perform better in school, especially on the STEM subjects, if they do their tests in the afternoon instead of the morning, and if they start school later, they just perform better. There's evidence for this. It's very simple, and it's not that some people think they'll just sleep, they'll go to bed later and sleep later, and it doesn't matter. The children actually get 1 hour more of sleep if they do that. So this translates back to eliminating daylight saving time and living in your natural time zone. This would really impact our children as well.
No. So if we have some question for the audience, and this in this line is, I say, for example, the Spanish expert committee created in 2018 was unable to reach an agreement on which would be the condition in European countries. So this argument against the
Can't hear you.
Javier, we can't hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, I'm going to try again. You can hear me? Hello? So let's try again. Can you hear me now, Maria Angeles?
Yeah, you can. Now, try again.
Yes, I'm going to try again. Okay. So, how can be possible that the expert committee, the Spanish expert committee, that was unable to reach an agreement on what will be the correct decision for Spain, and similar issues have happened in the rest of the European countries? So, the question is, which are the key arguments against stopping this time, and do they have any supported but evidence?
I'm sorry, but I can't answer because I'm subjected to confidentiality with regarding the decisions and discussions in this committee. So I can tell you my opinion, but not the opinion of the remaining members of the committee.
Okay. We can have enough with your opinion, Maria.
Okay, well, in my opinion, as a chronobiologist, and as I have said, it's quite simple because there is no disagreement at all. I mean, all chronobiologists tell exactly the same. It is better to stop with the DST-10 because it is not clear the advantages, and even although the evidence, for example, in the case of heart attack, is only a moderate increase with a huge range between 4% and 25%, it's just better to avoid. It's the presence of precaution. You know, if you know that something perhaps is dangerous, it's better to avoid it, even in that case. But still, there is sufficient evidence, at least for sleep, for performance, and for discomfort in people, and especially in sensitive population, as we have mentioned here, that includes not only child and adolescents, but also older people. In this case, for example, they take longer to be adjusted to every clock change. So it's better to avoid it.
Okay. So maybe in 1 year or some month we can know all the information after the confidential Maybe I will ask you again in some months.
Maybe. I know. Well, they were supposed to tell everybody. I mean, a public document with the results, but till that point, you have to wait.
I think that it's also a part of it is the fact that we've had it for so long. It's been 50 years.
Yeah, we are used to. You mean
changing something that people are used to is always difficult. Yeah. People think it's normal. People are used to it, and people who do not suffer from it themselves have a hard time imagining that other people suffer from it. So that's also a point. People prefer that they have their long evenings and they don't care if other people have severe sleep shortage because of it.
Yeah, but in this case, I think that also language is very important. This is why we should avoid this summertime, wintertime.
A long summer night.
Yeah, because everybody thinks in summer, vacations, relax, so everything is positive.
And it's not just the summer months, it's 7 months of the year.
Yeah.
This. And because of it, in Holland, our children have to go to school in the dark for 5 weeks every year in the winter. If on Western European time, they would never have to cycle to school in the dark. That's the difference. We now have 5 weeks of darkness that they have to get up so early.
But also there is something very easy, let's say. Again, as the example I have said about going to bed 1 hour earlier or 1 hour before, tell people when do they go to sleep during working days and ask again during weekends, and you will see the difference. This implies we are short in sleep during the week and we try to recover this during the weekend, and you can't recover the sleep. This is what is exactly jet lag. And in Spain, it's quite common, not only in adolescents. We have seen it even in older people that are supposed to not have, let's say, work duties to get up in the morning and at a specific hour. This implies it's something that is quite common in Spain,
Something that we're used to. It's like it's normal that you wake up.
Okay, we have two. Sorry, it's very interesting, but we have just two more minutes, and we have the last question. I would like to have one minute for Ticia and 1 minute for Jay, 1 minute for Maria Angeles. Just this is a very important question: is what do you think that can be done to facilitate the member state take a decision before ending 2021? Difficult question. Is the last one. Do your best.
Well, here in the United States, of course, we're not members of the European Union, so I don't know if I can answer that question. But here in the United States, we do have the unique situation of we have several states passing bills in either direction, and we have provinces in Canada that are discussing going one way or the other. I am really hopeful that the lawmakers, the politicians, will actually listen to the scientists and look that we do have very clear evidence from studying millions of people across several years at almost every latitude and longitude that permanent standard time really does have the clear advantage, and we also see it historically when we in the United States tried permanent DST in 1974. It was quickly reverted, but after the loss of lives and money, it was reverted in the United Kingdom. It was reverted in Russia. So I'd really like if the lawmakers would look at the evidence, look at the history, and just go with the clear and simple solution of restoring permanent standard time. And given that we're in a pandemic and we're facing lockdowns and curfews, I would really hope that we can do this before the next clock change here in North America. That's coming up very quickly on March 14th. I'm writing letters. I'm making phone calls. I'm reaching out to everyone I can in my spare time to lobby to prevent that upcoming clock change. If we hit that clock change, then I'm of course hoping that it'll be the last spring forward, and we will fall back at the end of the year, and that would be the end of it.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we can do. We can divulge the information that we have, all the research, and try to get it to the right people, the right social organizations who also have a stake in this, and the educational boards and all the different kind of social organizations, to help them understand the importance of the issue, and they can help maybe educate the politicians and the decision makers about this.
Thank you, Tiziana.
Yeah, if I would say try to make accessible scientific evidence so people can make let's say, informed opinion when deciding, not only by, let's say, our prompt response to a question of what do you like, summer or winter? No, it is not as simple as that, and people must know this. So these kind of initiatives are very welcome, because they open a window for showing people what we know about these DST changes and how affect health and other aspects of our life.
Thank you, María. We are on time. Thank you much for the wonderful, amazing speakers. Thank you to the organization. And thank you to the audience, help us get our fight, help us to get our healthy life, healthy hours, and enjoy with our life, and because it's very important for all our health. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.